Okay, we're coming up to 10:05. So we shall make a start. My name's Brett Edwards. I am the National Chair for NASHiCS, and obviously you are at the NASHiCS webinar, hosted by NASHiCS, and will be presented by Darren Franks of Globex. This is Evacuation Aids Explained, and I'm not going to give a long introduction. I'm sure many of you know Darren. Darren has a wealth of experience both in fire safety management, and risk assessment, as well as the care sector. So is more than aware of the challenges that we face within this sector. This webinar should last approximately an hour. There will be opportunity for questions. What I would say is, if there are any questions for clarity, please feel free to raise them during the presentation. But if not, I would ask that all of your questions are placed in the chat. There's quite a lot of information that will be coming across today. We may run out of time in terms of questions. If we do, we will collate those questions, answer them as we have done with previous presentations, and then you'll be sent the Q&A sheet. This presentation, as I'm sure you're aware, will be recorded and therefore will be made available to all of those who attend, and it will also be placed on our website. And the presentation slides will also be shared with all that attend and be available on our website for a limited period for non-members. Obviously, you can gain access to that information via our website, nashics.org, as a member continuously, as we will leave it on there for members. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Darren, who will give his presentation. Darren.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you for the introduction, and I'll just share my screen. Right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending. And as I say, thank you, Brett, for the introduction and allowing me to speak again. And yeah, this is following on, some of you will know we've done a presentation already on fire risk assessment. Following on from that was about PEEPs, personal emergency evacuation plans. And then through that, now we're leading on to evacuation aids. So with no further ado, hope you find it interesting. And as I've said at the beginning of webinars I've delivered in the past, I'm not a big fan of them. I prefer the face-to-face engagement, but I'll do my best, so please bear with me. If the slides work. There's a good start, yeah. Right, so as Brett said, yeah, my background's in fire safety. I started in the Middle East doing on and offshore fire safety before coming back to the UK to specialise in fire safety management. And as you can see there, cover various aspects of fire safety, including with the care sector, which I'm conscious some of you may not be in the care sector viewing this. So hopefully I've kept the presentation quite generic and you'll all find it useful in one way or another. So although my background's fire safety, back in 2010 saw there was a bit of a, not necessarily a gap in the market, but a lack of understanding of the need to ensure the safe evacuation of people from buildings with mobility issues. So again, working with others, we introduced a range of evacuation equipment, and more importantly, the support services to provide training and maintenance. And our aim is basically just to raise awareness internationally of the need to ensure the safe evacuation of mobility impaired persons from buildings. So again, you've all got different backgrounds, but for us, and again, this is my personal experience as well as professional experience, but there is, and with any projects we're involved in, there's a big focus now on obviously getting people into buildings, rightly so, but there's not always the same emphasis of getting people out of buildings. And I'm not going to bore you all with lots of legislation and things, but it is important to realise these are various articles under the Regulatory Reform Order, because it does still seem to be a bit of a grey area of the need of getting people out. But again, not going to read all of these to you, and some of you that are involved in fire safety, maybe in the UK, may be familiar with the Regulatory Reform Order, where it is, you can see, like I say, I'm not going to read all these things to you, but that you need to do a suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment, which should be specific to the building and identify the needs of any particular risks within the building. And as we move down there, you can see that it's important also appropriate training. So it's basically just covering, because we're often said that where does it say specifically we must get people out of buildings, and again, working with others, this is what we're trying to achieve, is just raise awareness and of the need to get people out. And supporting the legislation is the guidance. And again, one of the big things we have, again, not going to read all of this to you, but you're probably familiar with that purple guide there. When it comes to the fire service, they are known as a fire and rescue service. They're not a fire and evacuation service. And we're often told that, you know, the fire service have said to us they will assist with getting people out of the building, especially within the care sector, which again isn't helpful, because we're, as with the fire risk assessment and emergency procedures, are trying to encourage that you take ownership and responsibility of your own buildings, to ensure that you're satisfied, or the responsible person is, that you've got suitable and sufficient provisions to get everybody out of the buildings. So the fire service, as I try to encourage, even if they're right next door to your home, you know, they could be at other incidents. They may not turn up in the first place. So do think of them as a rescue service. If everything fails, you must do everything reasonably practical to be able to get everybody out of the building. So again, some of my concerns and experience, as I've just said, is there is a risk to life, because the amount of places we go to, not just in the care sector, which I should say there's a lot with very high standards, but within other sectors as well, where there is a complete lack of understanding, and there is this dependence on the fire service to get people out. And from a responsible person's point of view, and duty holders potentially exposed to non-compliance, because again, there is a lack of understanding of current requirements. Also, I'll be a bit cautious what I say now, because I work very closely with the enforcing authorities, mainly the fire service, but with regulators such as CQC. Again, sometimes there's mixed messages. Just last week, I was in a school with special needs, and they were told that the fire service, when they've come round to do their familiarisation visits, the operational crew had said, you don't need to worry, we can get people out. And again, it's a bit mixed messages, and it doesn't help people like ourselves trying to raise awareness and trying to encourage you to have appropriate provisions in place, where someone with the uniforms come in and said, you know, not to worry about it. So hopefully from that previous guidance I've just said to you, it's important that you take responsibility for your own buildings and you have got appropriate provisions in place. And I would question if the fire service particularly do say things like that, ask for things in writing as opposed to post a verbal. We also come across inadequate fire risk assessments that aren't capturing the needs of mobility impaired persons or any disabilities. The emergency plans and procedures aren't specific to the building. In some cases, the wrong products are purchased, which we will look closely at some of the products shortly. And generally, what we're finding is that when it comes to safe evacuation, it is more of a tick box exercise, where people may buy a product, and as it says here, generally purchased online, looking for the cheapest option, fit it to the wall, and it's forgotten about. And there isn't a clear understanding of, again, what is required, training, etc., which we'll look at shortly. And in some cases where they have got the equipment and some training has been provided, there's an insufficient number of operators. And this can also be in the care sector, and I won't get too political, but again, post COVID and home working in other workplaces, you know, it is important to monitor the amount of people that are in the building at any one time, particularly in the care sector, if it's 24/7, if there's agency staff, and again, I won't get into staffing, but you must be satisfied that the provisions you've got in place can be implemented. So again, ensuring that you've got a sufficient number of operators. Also, during fire drills, some people will purchase the equipment, we deliver the training, and as part of the training, we always encourage that, you know, fire drills are also part and parcel of raising people's awareness and being sure that, you know, it does what it says on the tin, i.e. the equipment can be used. And when training is delivered, it's often in a quiet staircase. There's no adrenaline or fire alarms going. So again, whether it's the care sector or wherever, I would encourage during fire drills that you do practice what your procedures are, even if it's more of a tabletop exercise. Obviously, there'd still be the practical element and you're not using residents, but it is essential that everyone has the confidence that they know how to evacuate everybody. And again, from the, we'll look at training shortly anyway, but from the fire drills, again, it's important that there's refresher training. If you do a fire drill and it was a complete disaster, it's important that it's not just filled in the logbook, that lessons are learned, improvements are made, maybe you need additional equipment or more training, or equipment needs rearranging. Another one we often come across is when we've done surveys and our teams are out providing surveys and demonstrations of equipment, we're often told that it's not in this year's budget to purchase equipment. And so we do remind that emergencies don't wait for budgets. You know, most buildings these days will have a fire alarm, fire extinguishers and everything else that's required to demonstrate compliance. Evacuation equipment really needs to be part of that and shouldn't be waiting on things like budget. And again, as we've said, legislation, as most of us will know, is life safety driven, but there's still not provisions to get people out of buildings in some cases. So again, food for thought there, and do make sure that you've got the appropriate measures in place. And then just following on, what I just mentioned is, again, if it's the care sector, there may be multiple people, for example, on a floor that need to be evacuated, yet you've only got maybe one evacuation aid. So again, it's not just ticking the box to say, yes, we've got the product. It's also understanding the building, the fire strategy for the building, the number of people there, and looking at, have you got sufficient evacuation aids, trainees to use the equipment. And also where you have got equipment, there's often no maintenance, which again, the next few slides will highlight this anyway, but it is essential that anything in the workplace, especially an evacuation aid, is maintained and regular checks on it to ensure that it's fit for purpose and can be used. And it's also a sector now which, although we work through a network of distributors and partners, especially overseas, this type of equipment is becoming a bit of an add-on business opportunity. So you can go online, you might find that your office supplies company sell fire extinguishers and evacuation aids, and it becomes more of a sales opportunity rather than something that's going to demonstrate compliance for you. So again, I'm not here as a sales pitch, just raising awareness, but I would use a company that is specific for the equipment and can provide the full service. It's not just a matter of purchasing the equipment and putting it on the wall. And the industry itself, there is no clear standards, and you'll see in the next couple of slides where I highlight this with other fire safety equipment. And with my previous presentation that we've done on personal emergency evacuation plans and generic ones, or general as some would call it, again, it is essential. All of these things, as we've just said, with fire risk assessment, emergency plans or procedures, it's essential that there is a personal emergency evacuation plan. And especially within the care sector, we often find that care plans are thought of as a personal emergency evacuation plan. I would encourage that they're kept separate, completely separate. And so that, again, responsible persons and duty holders are confident that they've got the appropriate measures in place and, you know, can demonstrate that as well. You know, I've put the new legislation on there because it does seem to me, don't get me wrong, I find it fantastic how industries do change, but we've been inundated with things about fire doors. They can't afford maybe evacuation equipment at the moment because they're having to do things with fire doors, which my point here is there's legislation in place now to ensure that you've got appropriate measures in place. When the new legislation comes out, there does tend to be a bit of a sometimes knee-jerk and overreaction. Again, my point is just raising that need for evacuating everyone. And again, silos of compliance that we find within all organisations, and again, sorry, this isn't just for the care sector, but with any larger organisations now, we come across areas where the responsible person at the top or the managing director may assume that everything's in place. But actually, when you look at all the different elements of what's required to be able to demonstrate compliance, things aren't always collaborative. And you do get this sort of silo working that comes together. So in some cases, we found that it's the health and safety or fire safety officer or advisor that will initiate a requirement for a particular product. Then that may be handed to a procurement department who, again, no disrespect to them, may go on the internet. We've all got roles to fulfill, and they're looking at maybe the cheapest option and purchase the wrong product. So the product's delivered, and then there isn't the element of HR and others that get the staff involved for operating the equipment or appropriate training. And then it may be facilities that look after the maintenance side and things as well. So it is essential. And again, part of what we're trying to do to raise awareness is that that does all come together, and it's a collective role as opposed to working in silos. There is the requirement, but there's also the need for a clear understanding of what's required, where it's located in the correct location, and all the training and everything else is in place. So, as this title says, everyone knows about these. Every commercial building must have them. And again, I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to waffle on as I often do on everything in depth here. But everyone's familiar with these things. It is a legislative requirement. Insurers will also dictate that firefighting equipment must be in a building. Even when it's a brand new building prior to handover, the equipment needs to be there. But we often find that evacuation equipment is not in the same way as other fire safety equipment. It's taken as the norm where you need a fire alarm and detection system, emergency lighting, maybe a suppression system, firefighting equipment. But evacuation equipment tends to be one of those after the event, or like I say, if an enforcing authority or regulator comes around, it gets highlighted then. So again, just trying to change that culture, that evacuation equipment is considered the same way as other fire safety equipment. And again, just reiterating the point, because my background's fire safety, I use things that I'm familiar with. And as many of you will know, there is a requirement to have fire extinguishers, but there isn't a requirement to actually use them, which again, with evacuation equipment, there is a requirement to have them, and there is a requirement to use them as well. At this moment in time, there's no specific British standards for evacuation aids, and in some cases, is it fire safety equipment? Is it a medical device? Because that's the approvals process that it goes through. So again, with others in the sector, we are trying to make more of a voice so that there are specific standards. And again, with fire equipment, you have third-party accreditation, whereas evacuation equipment doesn't get that. And with other things, obviously, there's new innovations where you've got self-maintaining extinguishers now, where you can do that yourself in-house without a third party coming in, and multi-purpose extinguishers. And again, just making that point there that there's no legal requirement to use them. Yet when it comes to evacuation equipment, again, in our view, every commercial building and residential building, if it's a ground floor and above, there must be provisions to get everyone out. And I know that's quite a statement, but after the horse has bolted isn't the ideal time. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll see that there are solutions available, not just from us, but from others. There does need to be more a legislative requirement, and working with insurers as well as part and parcel of what we do. And again, with the British Standards Institute, they've actually got our equipment and we provide their training. But again, we're trying to work to encourage having set standards so it is clear, as with fire safety equipment. And also it's specified by experts. As I said earlier, a lot of equipment is purchased online. So people make decisions for themselves. And even with us, with our teams, go out on site and we provide professional advice where they should be located. The users may decide for themselves, actually, we haven't got the budget, we'll just have one. So again, not taking it all back to like with fire extinguishers, but there's set standards for those, where they should be located, what height, how they should be maintained. And there's none of that for evacuation equipment, which again, it's down to responsible persons to ensure that there's appropriate provisions in their own buildings. And again, not teaching anyone to suck eggs, legislation is life safety driven, not always property protection. Yet in a lot of cases, as hopefully this is highlighting as I'm going through it, there's inadequate provisions to get people out, which legislation is all about life safety. So there does need to be a lot more. And it's not just us saying this or making it up as we go along. Other market leaders within the evacuation sector, one's recently done a white paper, and like I say, their intention is to lobby government to do even more and more. So again, we'll work collaboratively to try and raise awareness of the need for the equipment. So back to why evacuation aids. We'll all know walking down the stairs, no win, no fee. Carrying someone out of a building isn't appropriate in this day and age. So as you can see from the bullet point list there, obviously they save lives, so we can get people out of the building. You'll see hopefully by the end of this, and some of you will be familiar with the equipment anyway, that there's simple operation. There is minimal manual handling, which is why it's so important. And I'm often asked about these next two, not putting firefighters' lives at risk and property protection. Because my background's fire safety, some of you, well, hopefully a lot of you will know, the first priority when the fire service arrive to a scene is everybody out of the building. And if it can't be reported that yes, they are, they're then putting themselves at risk going into a building, potentially where there's a fire, obviously, to rescue someone that really should already be out of the building. So potentially putting firefighters' lives at risk. And also, as I said, with the insurers that we work with as well, trying to raise awareness there. If they're rescuing someone from a building, the fire's developing in another part of the building, there's much greater losses. and again has a knock-on effect to insurers as well, so which is another sector that we work with. And again, not to go on and dwell about this, we all know there's been fires in the care sector and loss of life. Maintaining public relations, and again for a lot of our clients, is making sure that appropriate provisions are in place. Us and others provide certificates, so when people are going into buildings, to show that appropriate provisions and training is they do have. And more importantly, not all of this should be legislation driven anyway. It's a moral and common sense. If you allow anyone into a building, you must have the provisions to get them out. So I know this is particularly for the care sector, which we'll get down to down here, but you can see here every building listed does need some form of evacuation equipment. And the users, obviously the first one that springs to mind is disabled. Obviously you've got the elderly, injured. It could even be a sporting injury of a member of staff at the weekend that, you know, they may need assistance coming out of a building in the event of emergency. So again, they're added to the list there. But particularly for the care sector, there's a lot of focus on the residents. It could also be staff and visitors. If a visitor comes to see their parents or parent, they're going up in a lift in a wheelchair, what do you do about them? So again, it's important that at reception there is a clear understanding whether a resident comes down, which I know I might have the easy bit, but in reality, residents may go to the bedroom of who's in care. So again, it's important to cover this, not necessarily with our PEEP, but that'll be a general emergency evacuation plan to ensure that if a visitor comes in a wheelchair, again, you can get them out of the building as well, not just the resident. So other specific issues for the care sector is a type of premises. And sorry, I'm not going to talk all day about this, but I'm conscious you all come from different backgrounds. So a care home's quite an easy one. You've got supported living. It is important to understand the purpose group of the building and how the building works as well. And again, as we were saying at the beginning about fire risk assessments, it's important that you have a suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment carried out that takes into account the fire strategy for the building. Because a lot of people, well, in offices, obviously, most people are familiar with the alarm goes off, everyone leaves the building. Within the care sector or the care home, it may be progressive horizontal evacuation. So you're just moving across different compartments. But ultimately, you still need the equipment. We're often told, because you've got all this compartmentation, we don't need evacuation aids. The fact is you do, because if you're at this end of the building, for example, then the same should apply for able-bodied and mobility impaired persons. If an instant's this end and the staircase is this end, ultimately you've got to take someone down the stairs. So again, it's essential that you can get people out to not just a place of relative safety, i.e. a refuge or another compartment, but they can be taken outside the building. Okay. And obviously in the hospital sector, it's normally beds that are wheeled out rather than evacuation in some cases. So in our opinion, what's required? Again, I will speak even faster, so there is time for questions, hopefully at the end. But the first thing is encouraging you do get professional advice, experts in their field. And if you haven't got equipment already, have a survey done. Surveys and demonstrations should be free of charge, where a company will come out and you can actually understand what you're purchasing, as opposed to just going online, seeing a product, ticking a box, which unfortunately, as I said earlier, does become a tick box exercise. But that you do have the correct equipment. We still go to places now where they may have evacuation mats and sledges in a lower level of the building, assuming it could be pulled up stairs, and they're not designed for that. So again, it's important to have an understanding. So having the correct equipment, and then once you've got the equipment, making sure it's commissioned. And again, because of my background with fire extinguishers, I'm trying to apply the same principles to evacuation equipment as well. Even we use couriers, or if people are buying offline, they're chucked in back of vans, put into a care facility, just hung on the wall. There should be something there that it's commissioned to make sure that it hasn't been damaged in transit or anything like that. Installation in the correct location. Again, parcel of the survey, that should be advising you professionally where you have them located. From our point, we tend to use platinum, gold, silver and bronze. So again, depending on where they're located. And for example, if we had a building like this, ideal world, you'd have one on every single staircase at every level. In the real world, that doesn't always happen. So have it in locations, for example, opposite here, so at least people can move in two directions and make their way out of the building, which again comes back to the fire strategy. and understanding what is actually required, as opposed to a sales pitch. Then once you've got the equipment, making sure you've got the right number of operators, which is important, and that the appropriate training is provided, that we'll look at shortly, together with the maintenance and refresher training, as I said earlier, with the fire drills, making sure that you've got a PEEP process in place, because in a lot of cases as well, we'll get there, and as I said, there isn't the PEEPs, which there needs to be this clear understanding of what an individual's requirements actually are. Just because the fire alarm's gone off, it doesn't mean it's a fire. Could be a false alarm, so there needs to be the provisions in place for investigation, and then if someone did need to be evacuated, obviously staff are familiar with it, and the PEEPs are used in training as well, so it's not just a matter of reading a document quickly at the time of an emergency, and it becomes part of the course, and everyone's familiar with what needs to be done. Record keeping, which again, trained personnel, that needs to be recorded, and this was my point earlier with the silo working. In some cases it can be HR that take care of training, so all the training records are maintained by them, but maintenance of equipment might be with facilities, and they maintain that in a separate way. So it's important that it does all come together and everyone knows where it is. And also doing an audit or review. So again, specifically in the care sector, residents move on, understanding where you have got people with mobility issues, updating PEEPs if people's get better or deteriorate. There needs to be a regular audit and review of what's required. It may be that you've got more people on a particular floor than you had the previous year. So again, this needs to be something that's live and reviewed. And if you need additional equipment or additional staff to assist with the training. As I said earlier, means of escape should be the same as with able-bodied persons. It shouldn't be discriminatory. There should be means of escape in two directions, so that, as I showed you from here, someone in this room, for example, if an incident happened this end can go out this way, and vice versa, they can go out this way. So again, just having that clear understanding. So finally, taking breath, what is an evacuation aid? So again, this is where, from our point, it is just raising awareness, because there are all sorts of evacuation aids. It could actually be just a person assisting someone down the stairs, and where all of these things come in, it's not just the horizontal across a building. As I said earlier, if they're on upper levels or lower levels, it is getting out to a place of complete safety out of the building. And don't consider refuges as a place of complete safety, because they're not. They're a place of relative safety, and people need to be moved away from there. And also the understanding of what a refuge is, it's not somewhere where you leave someone for the fire service to come, as I said earlier. It is somewhere of relative safety, potentially where you're investigating to find out, is it an incident, a real fire or not? Do we need to evacuate or not? And then if you do, you've got the appropriate measures to get people out of the building. So first of all, starting with these, there's all different names, and transit chair, ambulance chair, transportation chair, and carry chairs all tend to be the same thing. And I'm going to show you some pictures in a moment, but these are generally devices that are used for traveling along corridors, just horizontally through a building, and they should not be confused with an evacuation chair. As I said earlier about the British standards, again, some companies make it up as they go along, but an evacuation chair is something specifically designed for coming down the stairs. And we've also got evacuation sledges, which we'll look at shortly, and also stair climbers, because if you've got a basement and coming up the stairs, I'm going to show you some products soon that could be carried, but this is where it's important to have the surveys and the demonstrations, because if you've ever tried carrying a chair with someone in it, you've got to be fairly strong. Don't just put it on the wall in a basement assuming that you can just carry everyone up. It is essential that it can be achieved, and if you've got someone quite petite taking someone my size up, they're not going to be able to do it. So again, it comes back to the training and understanding. The fact is, you've still got to get people out, so it may be that you need something like a battery operated stair climber, which from our point, they're often used also with lift breakdowns as a backup there as well, which we'll move on to in a while. And also finally, portable ramps. You know, it may be you don't need any evacuation aids. There's just two steps. We've actually been to places where we don't help ourselves because there is no sale. Obviously we are a business, but it's about raising awareness. And we've actually said, you just need a ramp, or you've only got two steps, just bump them down in their wheelchair. Don't buy any products. You know, it is what's fit for that building and understanding. So evacuation aids. And again, I won't dwell on prices here too much, but the whole point of this presentation was just to give you a bit of a taste of what is out there and an idea of costs and things. So there are about 10 main brands, including ourselves, of evacuation chairs with hundreds, if not thousands, of resellers. And this is where it's important to come back to taking responsibility for your own buildings and understanding what you need. And like I say, we work through a network of distributors, and some of our distributors will sell online. So we do try and have a policy that we don't do a sale without training, but obviously that can't be managed overall. But it is important to understand how the equipment is sold. So again, just a reminder, purchase from a company that provides a complete service, meaning the survey, demonstration, training and maintenance. And just to give you an idea of the prices of the chairs can vary between again, I need to read them, but you can see there's quite a significant difference in some prices. So in some cases, it's important to shop around. And I'll say we're going to look at the equipment shortly anyway. And once you've got the equipment, there's the need for the training and also ongoing maintenance as well. And you can get compliance packages, which the company then should just remind you when refresher training is needed, or more maintenance. And again, making sure the products are specific. Oops, sorry, specific to your building and procedures, not the company's needs. You've got to take ownership of them. So these are the transportation chairs I was talking about earlier, and as you can see, they're very good. They've got the wheels, and they do what they say on the tin, as it were. They're for horizontal movement across a building. Some of them can be carried, but they're not deemed as evacuation chairs. And sorry, I don't know what, I just found any old photos, not particularly just the bar, but you can see they had this product here. They've actually changed it now for a proper evacuation chair, and that was an example of where they just bought the cheapest online. And onto evacuation chairs, which they all come in all different shapes and colours, and we're often phoned and asked, can we provide training on a blue and yellow one or a green one? And it's more done by colours, so they don't even know the makes of what's there. But again, just to understand the difference in them, these are ones which have the deployable rear wheels, which some people aren't a fan, but they are the most popular evacuation chair in the world, to be perfectly honest. And they do as everything says here. So the chairs are designed for one person operation, so they can be used for travelling horizontally as a transportation chair, and for travelling downstairs, which I'll show you how they do that shortly. And although they're designed for one, we recommend that there's two people in the training. So I know you've never got a perfect system, but it is something that for opening doors on exit routes, and as I said earlier, with the training is often done in a quiet environment. When you've got the fire alarm going, you're going down the stairs, it's also to provide assurance to the person actually sitting in the chair as well. Some also have a carry facility. So you can see with this one, for example, and this one, literally just come down the stairs, whereas this one's got a facility there where 2 or 4 people can actually carry the chair down the stairs. So you can see, for those of you that, I'm sure most of you have seen them before, they fold flat, hang on the wall like a fire extinguisher with a cover on them 9 times out of 10. And then once they're opened up, they look something. And you can see the weight capacity is generally between this, which I'm not going to quote them all the same because obviously there's all different models on the market. But some have lockable rear wheels, which again is the importance of the training to understand what you have got and how it works. And they all should include the instructions, which I would take the instructions as an aid memoir. They're not there to read and you understand the use of the chair. You do need practical training on it as well. Okay. So some of the positive comments about these is obviously they're the most common, lightweight, simple to operate and easy to maneuver because they're so compact. The not so positive feedback we get about this particular operation is the standing on the one foot to deploy the rear wheels. But again, from our point, they're things that hopefully you're never going to need. And so long as the training is fit for purpose and the clear understanding, they do exactly what they should do. The other type of evacuation chair is the 4-wheeled ones, which again, same things. And you'll see this is almost the same as the previous one. Fold up flat, come with a cover. Once they're deployed, they look something like this, all different colors again, depending on the ones you've got. But once they're deployed, they've got 4 wheels on the ground. So there's no standing on 1 foot to deploy the rear wheels or to put them away again. So in some cases, people do feel more comfortable with this particular product. And some of the feedback we get is that they're more comfortable. Point I make is these are for use in the event of emergency. They're not there for sitting in front of TV all night. They're not for comfort. And the not so is that they are a little bit heavier, and some have more clips and things to engage for their use. And how they work is basically, or the majority of them have this belt system, where you've got the two skis and literally a rubber belt goes around them, and it is the weight of the person on the belt that generates friction against the ski, which controls that descent coming down the stairs. So all different manufacturers have slightly different skis, but that's the main principle of how they work. So you can see coming down is just one person, going up you need the two for carrying it. And there are some other types. You've got the ones with the tri-wheels, which again can do the same thing, and if they work for you, that's great. You've got another one here which is specifically for spiral staircases, which are traditional evacuation chair, which I've just shown you with the two skis, are not designed for tight spiral staircases. So this particular chair is, which again comes back to it needs to be fit for purpose. And then you've got these tracked ones as well, which do have more grooves in them and a braking system as well. So there's all different types when you start looking at them. And the powered stair climbers, again, same principle, fold flat, some of them. Some are personnel carriers, others you've got where you put the actual wheelchair on it. And if you think back to the prices, this is where it's from about £2,500 to something like 12,000 for something like this, where the wheelchair actually goes on it. But again, you need a big staircase. But they are a solution. They're battery operated, so they need trickle charging. And again, training is essential. Then we come on to evacuation sledges and mats, which are very popular within the care sector, probably the most popular type of products. So here, as we call them, a sledge, and you've got mats, and then you've also got the sheets that go under the mattress. So the sheets, again, great product, but again, there's more training that's needed with some of those. Often we find that beds are very close to walls, so the bed would have to be moved to able to use the actual facility. Mattresses may not fit through doorways. Which is, again, a lot of people look at videos online, think they look great. They're normally filmed in a perfect scene where you've got maybe a hospital wing with double doors and things like that. So again, you need to understand, are they fit for purpose? Don't just buy them, fit them and assume that they are. They're difficult to maneuver a mattress actually round a bend in the staircase on a small landing. The mattress also has extra weight. So although the product's great, it can be when it comes to the training, by the time you've got the actual product, the mattress and the person, it's quite a heavy device to use. And where you put them, if you put them under every bed, is great, again, depending on budgets. But we've often found when we've done audits is we've done a random survey of a few beds. Some have been taken off where they assumed they had them. There was no real management of them or clear understanding of where they are or they aren't. They've forgotten to put them back on and things like that. So what we tend to recommend is having the sledges and mats so that they can be put in designated points. There's a clear understanding. People see them as a visual evacuation aid. And they're allocated, again, subject to the peak process that should be in place. And if need be, if there's more than one or two and you don't want to litter the whole building with these things, they can also be stored under beds as well, which is why they're also useful now to consider in a residential environment, not just a workplace. But again, the same thing, videos often show perfect situations. I would encourage, if you're not familiar with them, have a survey and demonstration of them. They're not suitable for going upstairs. We've found some places where people assume they can bring them up and you can't. So again, understanding the building. And again, as alluded to earlier, with portable ramps, it may be appropriate just to have a ramp, or just if it's one step, don't even bother with the product, save your money, save for training and everything else. Just bump someone down the step. So on to certificated training. First of all, make sure you've got the appropriate number of people, especially post-COVID and home working. If it's not just a care sector, you've got a lot more people working at home now. We've been into a lot of our commercial clients where they haven't got people there. They've got the products on the walls, but because people are working from home, they've now had to set up a diary of when people are in to make sure they've got appropriate procedures in place. So again, consider that sort of thing. There's generally 2 sessions. And again, I'm speaking more about our experiences. There's an operator training session, which is exactly that. We're training people in the correct use of the chair. Or if you're in a large organisation, have a certificated training session and you provide the training internally. We encourage annual refresher training. again, depending on your own training policy of how they're used anyway, but as a minimum, a bit like anything these days, it sits there all year round on the wall. Someone comes to use it in an emergency, they've forgotten completely. So again, back with your fire drills and refresher training is important. And again, as a general rule of thumb for ourselves, we recommend 4 to 6 people per session, purely because of the number of people on the stairs. Sorry, I'm speaking faster, I'm conscious of time now. Also said the products generally are designed for 1-person operation for coming down the evacuation chairs, this is, but we recommend 2 to provide that reassurance to the user and assistance to the operator for opening doors. Also make sure trainees are willing to carry out the task. We've been to some places, I've actually covered a couple not so long ago, where done the classroom bit, went to go out on the stairs, everyone had some sort of ailment, said they couldn't do it anyway. So what was the point of coming on this training? So make sure that they're also capable of using the products. Don't just put a name in the frame to tick a box to say, yes, we've got trained personnel. Must be physically fit as well. As I said at the beginning, there's not a lot of manual handling, but it is important that people are capable of carrying out the task, wear appropriate footwear and clothing. We look after a lot of national retailers where staff are in tight clothes or stilettos, normally ladies in the stilettos, but it is something to make sure that people can actually operate the products. Again, emphasising the PEEP process, can't emphasise that enough, as something, an essential part of any evacuation equipment. Also, maybe involving the person with the mobility issues. Everyone assumes what they can and can't do. In some cases, dummy may be used for training or just the able-bodied staff, but not in all care, in the care sector, obviously, but where you can, just involve the users as well. This is the type of product, this is what you need to do, this is how you do it, basically. And again, just reiterating the procedures, just because the alarm's gone off, it doesn't mean just get everyone out. It's have your own procedures, taking ownership of it. Is it a confirmed fire? If it is, clearly you need to use all this equipment, but it does add to stress and duress, not only of the users, but also the operator. So there's no point just because I've been doing my hairspray, set off the fire alarm accidentally, it's not meaning that you've all got to get out. So making sure you've got that investigation period there as well. And do practice with them regularly. Like I said, we've said during fire drills, even make it part of team meetings and things like that. And the annual maintenance, some of you will have heard of PUA. And as I said at the beginning, there are currently no set British standards, which is why we're working with others to try and introduce those. But between PUA and the regulatory reform order, there is a requirement to maintain the equipment. And we generally recommend that there's annual maintenance by a competent person, as with your fire extinguishers, normally an external company, but that you also do your own internal checks as well. And finally, just to say with what we do internationally, just raising awareness through exhibitions and seminars, but things like this we also offer to companies as well, to come in, talk to senior management teams, to raise awareness of what should be in place, offer some solutions. And like I say at the beginning, it's more about raising awareness and assisting people with what the current requirements are and what they need. And yeah, I know I talk fast at times because I didn't think I was going to get through all the slides once I looked at the number that have been produced, but that's us. And like I say, if you do have any requirements, hopefully you've got some questions now, I'll do my best to answer. You can see our website on there, which has got a couple of videos that show how evacuation equipment works. And that's it. I think I made it through in the hour, Brett.
You certainly did. Thank you, Darren. That was very comprehensive and extremely informative. And in fact, we don't actually have very many questions, so you clearly covered the subject quite adequately. No, I would say that was a good thing. I would say that was a good thing. Obviously, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to use the reactions at the bottom of your screen, and obviously raise your hand with that, and we can sort the unmute out and you can answer the questions. But we do have a couple of questions. First one's from Trevor Wilson, and it says that it works basically in social care. They have a lot of people supported who need mobility support. A lot of rescue mats, such as Outback mats, have statements that suggest that you watch a DVD or YouTube video to learn how to use them. Would you consider this to be sufficient training?
No, as a company and personally, I wouldn't. I mean, for refresher training, it can be useful. but it's actually feeling the weight of someone in it, watching a video in a perfect world and seeing people calmly coming down the stairs. But like I say, if it's someone much larger than the operator, it's having that understanding of how you obviously opening the product and deploying it can be done with a video, but if you're physically understanding the weight that you're going to take when you get the angle on the stairs, you're not going to appreciate that from a video. So we always recommend practical training and certificated as well, so that you've got a record of that. And again, not boring everyone with the legislative point, but it's generally, whilst the sun's shining as it is here now, no one worries about it. It's when things go wrong and you have to demonstrate, have you done what's reasonably practicable? And having those training records isn't much more appropriate than saying, yes, I watched a video on YouTube or whatever. But you have your own policies for that.
And I guess that the follow-on question from that is, what's your suggestion? There's a concern in some organisations around the risks posed to staff and residents utilising the evacuation equipment for training. Do you have any suggestions on how that can be got round or simulated so that risk is reduced?
Yeah, which is another great point. It is training and awareness. You know, these things often, we've been to some places, they're stuck on the wall. No one's ever taken a cover off it or seen what's underneath it. And I think through the training and awareness, people will understand exactly what they do and how they work. And when it comes to the actual training, if you don't want to use residents because of that risk of injury, you know, we've tabletop exercises, even things like that. But from the staff point of view, you know, you're a care sector that the residents are dependent on the carers. So long as they've got an understanding of it all and how it works, that's fine. But no, just purely through raising awareness and, like I say, practical use of products. And I know some companies, like I say, use dummies and things, so you do feel the weight rather than putting someone in which is appropriate. We have other clients where everyone will get in it and take it in turns so that they understand how it feels going down the stairs, particularly with sledges and mats and things like that. But yeah, just general raising awareness. Sorry, sound like a politician now, not answering things.
No, that was fine, thank you. We've got another question here from Stephen McHale. He attended a conference a few years ago, and basically one of the speakers stated a number of people with mobility issues wouldn't necessarily be confident in getting into evacuation aids. And obviously this could be a potential problem. Do you think that's still something that is the case now?
I think so. Yeah, basically. But this is why I was covering that it's important to involve people in it. Don't just assume, yes, they can get in it. Even in an office block where it's someone with say a broken leg at the weekend, put them in a wheelchair, put them in an evacuation chair. If they've got a stair landing and their legs sticking out in plaster, they're not going to get round the bend. So it is that engagement with a lot of, you know, the whole point of these webinars and the good work that NASHiCS does is sharing ideas with like-minded people and coming up with the solutions. It's not one size fits all. And I know I've been to lots of conferences and things, and you get speakers that are very outspoken and everyone's taking note. But again, it's for the ownership and responsibility to be exactly that. And I would just encourage, involve people. In an emergency situation, you'll be surprised what people will do. But yeah, just that involvement in an appropriate manner. But the key thing in the care sector is the staffing. You know, residents 9 times out of 10 will go along with what's required, but is why the PEEP is so important, to understand. It may be that one person has got mental issues and things like that that may cause other issues. So again, back to the PEEP process is the key thing, which I think in a lot of conferences about evacuation equipment that I've been to, PEEPs haven't even been mentioned. They're more of a sales pitch just for a product as opposed to understanding of the.
Okay, magic, thank you. Once again, thank you for that's extremely interesting, informative and very comprehensive presentation. I hope everybody's enjoyed it, and certainly there's a number of takeaways from that. As I say, the session has been recorded, and the presentation as well as the recording will be available on the NASHiCS website for a short period on the main website, and then we'll move across to the members area. So you are able to go back and refer to that. And Darren, I'm sure, I know you put your contact details on as the last slide, that you're quite happy for people to contact you for advice in moving their situation forward and evaluating what their needs will be.
By all means.
Excellent, thank you. It just leaves me to say thank you for attending. I'm just going to give you a couple of dates for diary, as we normally do. So obviously on the 4th of April, we have a conversation and catch up, and that's a monthly conversation and catch up for an hour at 10:30. It's always the first Tuesday of every month. And next webinar is on the 11th of April, and that is LifeVac, which is around choking in the care sector and potential solutions. We've then, on the 9th of May, we have robotics in care. Again, very interesting. We've had this person present to us at one of our previous seminars. And talking of seminar, on the 15th of June, Thursday the 15th of June, Coin Street Community Buildings in London, we have our summer seminar, and will be attended, and there will be presentations from Professor Dame Carol Black around well-being. We've also got the Health and Safety Executive, the Policy Department for Social Care, giving us an update and their 10-year plan. We have Care UK talking. We also have a case study from Barchester Healthcare and the National Fire Chiefs Council. If you go to NASHiCS.org, I'm sure that you will find plenty of information on all of the events that I've talked about and future events, whether you're a member or not. So that just leaves me to say once again, thank you, Darren. That was excellent. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you've got any questions of Darren or of this presentation or any other item that you'd like to discuss, either with the NE or Darren, then if you could contact us through the NASHiCS website, all our contact details are on there, and we will be glad to pass it on. If you're looking for further advice and guidance in terms of evacuation aids, as I'm sure you can appreciate, Darren is the person to go to. Give them a call, or of course, if you've got your own service provider, have a chat with them. So that's it. Thank you very much. Safe journeys away to wherever you're going. Enjoy the rest of your day and week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.